All right, now to give us more perspective on this, we're joined by Mr. Dov Zakheim, who's a former Under-Secretary of Defense in George W. Bush's administration and is currently a senior advisor at Center for Strategic and International Studies. He's joining us live on this broadcast. Mr. Zakheim, this is a pivotal moment in the Russia-Ukraine war. For the first time since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Russians and the Americans have met. Interestingly, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was kept out of this meeting. In your assessment, how well or how, interestingly has this meeting between the Russians and the Americans gone?
Well, for a start, the Russians seem very happy, which makes the Europeans unhappy and Zelensky even less happy. The Russians, first of all, accomplished what Mr. Putin wanted, which was to deal directly with the United States over the head of Ukraine. And Europeans I've spoken to, and not just Europeans, many people in Washington worry about whether this is a reprise of 1938, where Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of Britain, and Daladier, the Prime Minister of France, cut a deal with Hitler, basically to give away part of Czechoslovakia. Within a year, Czechoslovakia disappeared, was conquered by the Germans, and beyond that, World War II started. This is the nightmare that bothers the Europeans, and it bothers many in Washington. Zelensky, of course, is terrified that a deal will be cut, that he'll lose part of his country. The Russians are, as you just reported, are demanding that the United States and NATO withdraw the commitment to bring Ukraine into NATO that was made in 2008. That, of course, would eliminate the kind of deterrent that you just showed Defense Minister Healy talking about. Mm-hmm. So this is preliminary. Everybody says it's exploratory. Ultimately, the deal will be made between Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump. We all know that. Whether Zelensky will even have a say is an open question.
Right.
The Europeans have to do more. Everybody agrees about that.
But at this moment, looking at how things are panning out, the Europeans are feeling betrayed. You mentioned that there could be a deal that could be done above the heads of Volodymyr Zelensky and the other leaders within Europe. But considering that a deal can only be struck between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, what do you think could be a meeting point for these two leaders? And would that mean a betrayal of Europe by the United States of America that has given this overarching umbrella of security for Europe under the NATO military alliance?
Well, first of all, the leader of the delegation, Senator Rubio, was actually an instigator of congressional legislation to keep us in NATO. He's committed to NATO. He's committed to Europe. So is Mr. Waltz. The advisors around Trump, in other words, are committed to staying in Europe. And Mr. Trump has not said he's going to pull out of Europe. I mean, we have to be very clear about what he said. He said he wants to pull about 20,000 troops out. That leaves 80,000 troops. That's still a lot of troops. It's more than the entire British Army. So we have to be very, very careful about what we predict. We know what Mr. Trump has said. Right. We also know that Trump lays out ideas and then sees whether they will stick or not. He's absolutely right that Europe is not spending enough, that it's spent decades basically relying on the United States to defend Europe while Europe spends money on social welfare. Defense secretary after defense secretary and president after president have said this is not right. Mr. Obama was the one who coined the phrase free riders, and he was talking about Europe.
Right.
So in that respect, Trump is absolutely right. They have to spend more. I think what they're trying to do with the EU to somehow create a separate defense budget approach is right to do so that they don't get caught up in their bureaucracy. There's a lot that they have to do. Should they do that, and given that Mr. Trump has not said he's getting out of Europe, I think people should be very careful about predicting gloom and doom. Should they worry? Yes, but there's a lot they need to do.
Interesting. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Zakai, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
Thank you so much.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.